Hi, my name's Counsel and I'm the founder of Turn Your Knowledge, Skills and Talent into Income. We've heard a lot in recent times, especially the current news about the changing financial circumstances around the world. We're especially hearing a lot of, perhaps the default scenario that might come out of America. We certainly are seeing lots of sovereign default sorts of news that's come out of the European situation. And recently we've seen the Irish situation being downgraded to such an extent that they're now calling it sort of, a junk economy. And I guess the thing that people ask me, probably more so now than before, is, okay, so what do we do now? What do we do to take care of our personal situations so that we don't get caught on the wrong side of this economic decline? And so I really thought long and hard about that, and I just want to share a few ideas about income itself and a couple of things to understand about the things that can produce income or cash flow and some of the things that can't produce cash flow given the changing economic circumstances. I think the first point to really stress is that your economic future is not going to depend on where the economy has actually been. We're sort of in this moving feast at the moment, and so to really get a good idea of what you can achieve, it's important to concentrate on where the economy is going, because there are lots and lots of changes that are coming up in the near future, and they're already present now. So we've got to be able to concentrate on where the economy is heading, and then being able to tap into the enormous changes that we're currently experiencing in a positive way. And we live in this time of rapid change, and the stress of the change that people feel is only going to it's only going to increase, because the rate of change is going to increase. And if you think about those changes, it really starts to heighten the economic stresses that people feel, and with that, the amount of free time you get access to is on the decline. And so when you put all those things together, you start to ask a question, well, okay, what does it all mean? And so my way of thinking, it really does mean two things. And the first thing that we take, or the first big message that we take out of it, is that our need for cash flow or extra cash flow is greater than it has been in a long while. And on top of that, our need for getting access to more knowledge and to greater amounts of skill is really important in terms of the development and in terms of the way that we not only survive these current changes, but the way that we progress and move forward. And I think if you understand that perhaps the biggest mistake that people will make during this time of rapid change is that they won't keep up their learning, or they fail to keep up their learning. And if you fail to keep up the learning with these times of change, then what you're actually doing is putting your economic future at risk. And Lee Cullum, she refers to this current age, or this climate that we're experiencing, as really the age of limbo. We're kind of sort of stuck in this sandwich. We're stuck in the middle of changing economic conditions on one hand, where the old economic system seems to be decaying, and the yet to really fully emerge new system that we can all learn to gain an advantage of. So we're kind of sort of sitting in this twilight zone at the moment. But within that twilight zone, if you start to learn what you can do to personally achieve, then what you'll find out that there's an enormous amount of opportunities. And so to successfully navigate the future, it's critically important to understand some of the cash flow mediums that we have available to us, and also what some of those mediums are capable of doing and what some of those mediums are not capable of doing given the changes in our economic circumstances or the changing conditions themselves. Now, from the outset, it doesn't really matter what economy that we're currently experiencing. The economy can only move in three directions. So here you are in 2011. And so from this point forward, the economy can only move upwards, or it pretty much can stay the same and just bubble along, going sideways, but not really going anywhere. And the other alternative is for the economy to continue to take a nosedive, as it is in various regions within the world. So if there's only three directions that the economy itself can go, there really are only three results that you can achieve. And one of those results is that you have money flowing to you and you gain all the cash flow that you need because you've increased your skill level and you've increased your knowledge level. If you fail to attract more income, then the only other two options are money doesn't actually flow to you because it's pretty much bubbling along sideways, or the alternative, which is something that I don't particularly want to think about, is that money flows away from you and you start to lose and you really can't get back in front of that scenario again. Now, your current results really represent simply what you've been exposed to up until now. But your future results, depending on whether you are going to learn a new set of skills, your future results really do depend on what you're willing to learn given changing conditions. Now, clearly, there's not much we can do about world economies. I mean, they'll have their own mechanisms and they'll have their own momentum. And there's pretty much not, we can't do anything about the Australian economy either. But in terms of our personal challenges, in terms of our personal economy, we have great control over what happens there because we have great control over what we can do and also the outcomes that we can achieve. Now, within that, if we start to understand if we gain access to greater amounts of knowledge and access to greater amounts of skills, then we can start to map our way forward because within each economy or within each sector, there are various economic mediums that we can extract extra cash flow from. Now, one of those mediums is the medium of land itself. Another medium you might think about, well, okay, all forms of real estate. Now, each of these mediums, they can branch open, so we can actually have industrial real estate, we can have commercial real estate, we can have residential real estate. So, every one of them will just branch open, but I'm just giving you, the big picture to begin with. We also have the medium of shares, and again, shares, they can branch open to its various subsets, and we can have the medium of collectibles. The medium of precious metals, there's a lot been spoken today about silver and gold and what's likely to happen with the prices there. We also got the medium of precious gems and the medium of business itself. Now, within all of those mediums, and again, if we're thinking about, well, okay, I think one of the important things is to be able to increase your cash flow given these changing times. Then you ask the question, well, okay, what criteria or what conditions would I need to have in place in order for me to get my increased cash flow out of land, for example? Well, one of the conditions or one of the criteria that you would need to have is access to cash in order to purchase the land, then to be able to do something about it. You would need a certain amount of skill in order to decide, well, what land package do I purchase and how do I actually now convert that land into cash flow? Then we need a certain amount of time to be able to put all those things together, or even to allow demand and supply factors to work in terms of you being able to extract your income from land. And then we'd need favourable economic conditions. And conditions that were favourable to looking at or seeing increases not only in land values themselves, but in the amount of cash flow that you can extract from land itself. Now, if you start thinking about the other mediums, and then you start thinking about the criteria that you would need in order to get whatever you want to get out of any of those criteria, and let's just use the idea of extra cash flow or extra income, then you ask the same question. Well, what criteria would you need in order for you to gain your advantage out of real estate or shares or collectibles? And when we start thinking in terms of criteria, we see they're pretty much the same. And then you can ask yourself, well, what would happen if any one of those criteria were currently missing from you? For example, what would happen if you lacked skill? Well, there would be no ability to gain my economic income out of any of those. What happens if you actually lack time? Or what happens if you lack the finances? Or what happens if the economic conditions weren't favourable? Then you can see any one of those criteria, if they're missing, then it would be really difficult for you to achieve the end game or the end results that you want. So we've got to start thinking a little bit differently about it. And we can go to the medium of business, because again, business can open up into all sorts of variables, and then we can, again, once we get these variables, we can open up them even further into their areas of specialities. But in the broad picture, we can think about manufacturing, We can think about wholesale, we can think about retail, we can think about all sorts of franchising affairs or licensing affairs that would open up into or branch out. We can think about primary producing. We can think about the service or being of service, the service industry itself. And the other one we can think about is the knowledge industry or the age of information, for example. Again, we can ask the same set of questions. In order for you to gain extra cash flow, what criteria would need to be in existence for you to be able to do it out of manufacturing or wholesale? And when we look at it, pretty much they're the same, except when we come down to the service industry and the knowledge industry. And it's really important that we kind of sort of focus on this area here, because as I'll show you a little bit later, we've also got to understand something about the notions of risk itself. Now, in terms of the knowledge economy, what we can see is we've got extremely favourable economic conditions because world economies, I mean this sandwich time, it's because world economies are moving away from the old decaying processes of industrialisation, and they're really moving into this transitional period into brain-driven knowledge economies. And within that, the opportunities ahead of us are actually enormous, because the more that an economy moves into that sort of brain-driven knowledge economy, then the more people begin searching for knowledge and information, which means the more people create this enormous, sort of almost global thirst for extra knowledge. And that's where you can start really tapping into a greater sense of cash flow for yourself with the least downside risk. So as we move forward, this notion of risk, I think it's important to come to terms with. And if we just kind of sort of, broadly describe risk as the potential for an action or an inaction to actually lead to an undesirable effect or an undesirable result for yourself. Now, if we think about risk in these terms, then we've also got to think about probability. What's the probability of you being able to achieve what it is that you want to achieve out of any of those mediums? So risk is the potential for an action or inaction to lead to an undesirable result, and then probability is the potential to lead to a desirable result for you. So let's have a look at some combinations. Well, the first notion of risk we could use is, well, it's high risk that it might lead to an undesirable result, or a low probability that you'll get whatever you want to achieve from it, such as extra cash flow. Another combination we could look at, something could be high risk, but it also could have a high probability, depending on the amount of skill that you are willing to learn, of returning to you the extra cash flow that is important for these next few years. Another combination we could look at would be something that has low risk, but a high probability of achieving the results that you're looking for, and something, of course, that has a low risk, but also a low probability of achieving the results. And so as you move forward, when you start to look at the mediums that are available, and then their various risk profiles, you can start to put together a bit of a picture for yourself of what you might want to start to venture into or start to increase your skills at. Because if you look at it here, with all of the other mediums, basically they require you to put in an amount of money in order for you to be able to get a return on it and then improve your cash flow. Now, for my way of thinking, as soon as you put money into a deal, you open up the possibilities that you might lead to an unfavourable or an unwarranted result. Now, down here, in terms of the service industry and the knowledge economy, you don't actually have to put in a lot of money in order to then develop a return. But what you do have to do is become skilled over time, because the economic conditions are currently favourable for setting up some sort of value service for people and some sort of entry into the knowledge economy. So for me, the greatest probability with the least downside risk is currently situated in these two mediums here. So it's kind of really unlike the more traditional mediums, because the more traditional mediums, they all have, given these current changing conditions, they all have an opportunity to go backwards. But within the knowledge economy, the upside potential is absolutely huge, and the downside potential is minimal. Now, I hope I've just been able to share a few ideas with you, and in the next video, I'll talk about the 3 stages of work that people experience, but there's a tendency to get stuck in one of these stages. And so, until I see you next time, my name's Counsel, and I really do give you an invitation to start living life passionately, on purpose, for purpose. Bye for now, and I'll see you later.